Look at that. It worked. Is technology a beautiful thing or what?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm here with Michael Hingson, and he is a world-renowned author as well as a survivor of 9/11. Can you share us a little bit about yourself, Michael?
Well, I've been blind my entire life. I was very fortunate to have parents who chose not to fear that, sort of in a sense like your parents who chose to do what they did to escape a situation. But my parents were told they should send me to a home because no blind child could ever grow up to be useful in society. And my parents said, "You're wrong," to all the medical doctors in Chicago that told them that I should be sent away. They said, "He can grow up to do whatever he wants, and we're going to give him that opportunity." So I grew up with an idea and a mental attitude from parents that didn't matter whether I could see or not, I could do whatever I chose to do. And I guess I always grew up knowing that I was a little bit different and knowing that I was blind, but at the same time not accepting that it limits me from doing stuff. And in the 50s and in the 60s, we didn't have a lot of the technology we have today. So doing things was a lot more difficult. So, for example, when I was in sales back in the late 70s into the 80s and so on, and going to places to sell products where I'd never been before, I needed to do things that today are in a sense easier to do, but it helped me build confidence to do them. That is to say, for example, if I was going to be going to Toronto, Ontario to sell, or even later when I was back here on the West Coast and selling to people like Francis Ford Coppola, the movie director and producer who ran Zoetrope Studios and then moved to the Bay Area, I needed to prepare by learning how to get to where they were, learning how I was going to do it, and more important than both of those, making the decision that I could do it. And my life essentially prepared me to be able to do that so that I learned not to fear doing things that were unusual or that were uh, what many people might call a challenge, but rather that another way to put it is blindness isn't the problem. It's our attitudes about blindness that tend to be the problem and really be the limiting barriers that we have to overcome.
Outstanding. The so right now you are a inspirational, motivational speaker. What themes do you talk about? Should an organization book you for one of their keynotes or conference?
Well, I hope they will. They can reach out to me at speaker@michaelhingson.com. Michael Hingson is Michaelhingson. But I talk about leadership, trust, and teamwork. One of my favorite breakout talks, although I've also given it as a keynote, is called Moving from Diversity to Inclusion. And the reason it's entitled that is that if you talk to most people who are so called experts in diversity, they never talk about disabilities. Um, I've been blind my whole life. My wife was a person in a wheelchair her whole life. And as I tell people, the marriage was great. She read, I pushed, worked out really well. But the reality is that it's important to recognize that we need to learn how to be more inclusive. We will grow in so many ways if we allow ourselves to include those who are different than we are. So I talk about that as well. Another topic that I talk about is entitled What Would You Do? And that really is the story of, or actually, it's What Will You Do? It's the story of what are you going to do if there's an emergency or something that happens that suddenly is unexpected to you that puts you in a crisis situation. How are you going to handle it? It's all about emergency preparedness and learning how to deal with that. So those are some of the talks that I give on a regular basis. I talk about the human animal bond and where where animals can and should and oftentimes do fit in our lives and how best to maximize those relationships.
Wow. And you are also involved with an organization that provides accessibility for web sites. The name of the company is
Accessibility.
Accessiby. Can you talk about your
Yeah,
involvement there?
accessibility, it's spelled ACCESSI, capital BE. And I discovered Accessibility in October of 2020 when I went to a website that I'd used before and I went there to register a website domain. But there was a message this time at the top of the website. It's something that I would hear with my screen reader. Sighted people might not even see it. It said, put your web browser in a screen reader mode by pressing Alt 1. Now it's put your website in a screen reader mode button. But the point is that if you push the button, something's supposed to happen. I had never heard of the message, never knew anything about it. And I decided on a whim, okay, I'll press it. And my gosh, this website, which was usable but very tough to use, became incredibly more accessible and easy to use than it ever had been. So I investigated and discovered Accessibility. And they also had a program where you could be a partner and sell Accessibility and get 20% of whatever you sold. And I said, well, I'll try that. But as I investigated, suddenly I got a call from the founder saying, no, we don't want you to be a partner. We want you to join the company
Mm.
because there's a lot you can teach us. And that's also how Unstoppable Mindset, my podcast, began, because they wanted a podcast. And so we started it. Accessibility, in a sense, is also a company that some people regard as controversial because it uses, in one sense, artificial intelligence to help make websites more accessible. And of course, there are a lot of negative people who say AI can't do that. Well, the reality is that we know how to make websites accessible. The World Wide Web Consortium has developed the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, which are the guidelines that people can use to make websites accessible. The problem is most website developers don't even know how to do it and don't know about WCAG. And also, a lot of developers say, well, it's going to cost so much money to do it. We're not going to pay for that. That's a mistake. Um, Accessibility used to say that the the widget that it created to use artificial intelligence would really make a website fully accessible. And now they recognize that there's a whole lot more to it than that, because there are things that the widget itself won't necessarily do as well as other technologies. And so they've developed other features to go along with what we call the Access widget. There's a program called Access Flow, which people can subscribe to, that will not only tell them what's wrong with their website, but it'll also tell them what code and how to insert code to fix it. Or they can contract with a company like Accessibility to actually do the work. So it's really grown a lot. But the whole idea is that at the lowest level, somebody can pay a little bit of money and this widget will go on their website and it will fix everything that it can. And it will make a significant difference in how usable and accessible your website is. And so I use it on my website and other people use it. Accessibility has grown an incredible amount over the past, well, now for me, it's been 4 years since I joined. And it's really doing a great job to make a big difference in websites becoming more usable. And anyone who thinks that they shouldn't make their website accessible is really missing it. Because in reality, 25% of all people in this country, for example, have some sort of a disability according to the Centers for Disease Control.
Mm.
If that's the case, and I believe it is, do you really want to lose or leave out potentially up to 25% of the people who could come and use your website? Or do you want to find a way to make it possible for those people to have the same access to your website that other people do? And that's what Accessibility says, and that's what Accessibility does. It's all about good business. It's not, oh, if you don't make your website accessible, somebody's going to sue you. That is not what Accessibility says. Accessibility recognizes that under the Americans with Disabilities Act, you can be sued if you don't make your website accessible. But Accessibility says it's the right thing to do. It's good business to come along and actually use however you want to do it to make your website inclusive for everyone. So Accessibility doesn't just help blind people, it also provides a lot of other kinds of profiles to, for example, make it possible for a person who is epileptic, who has epilepsy, to better use websites. There are a lot of websites that have blinking elements to attract people's attention to particular parts of a website. The problem is that if you happen to have epilepsy, blinking elements can throw you into having a seizure. So Accessibility has a way where you can go into the profile and stop the elements from blinking and use other technologies or other techniques to be able to get the same benefit. So there are a lot of different kinds of profiles. So it's a product that helps to remediate in general websites, whether you use just the lower end Access widget or you use some of the more sophisticated things that Accessibility has to offer. It will help to make your website a whole lot more usable and inclusive. And if you do it right, Accessibility can help you make your website fully inclusive by any standard. Whether
Mm,
it does all the work itself, you do more of the work or less of the work or whatever. It's a cool product and it's a cool company.
yeah. And I know earlier in your career that you worked at Quantum and many, and you also mentioned that you worked at IRA, one of the vision guidance.
Right.
Yeah, that was a great example of just technology helping, uh, disable function better through their days. And uh, I'm glad there are companies like Accessibility out there providing services like this. So that's outstanding.
Well, and one of the things that I point out to people is in reality, if we're going to be honest, every single person on the planet has a disability. For most
Yes.
people, your disability is your light dependent.
Hmm.
And as soon as the lights go out, if you don't have an immediate light source that just clicks on, you run around sort of in a panic until you find a smartphone or a flashlight to make your world light again.
Hmm.
But the reality is that that's your disability, you're light dependent. What we need to recognize disability is something that does not mean a lack of ability, but rather disability is a characteristic that we all share. It's just that it's different and it has different characteristics for different people.
Mm. The can you talk about your thoughts on AI and how it can help disability communities from that standpoint?
Well, so Accessibility is a good example of how AI is used in some ways. There are other products like Ira and another product called Be My Eyes that are two companies that can allow you to contact someone who can look through your phone, or in the case of Ira, actually even access websites or web forms that aren't totally accessible and help you fill them out and do other things. And both companies use artificial intelligence to augment the ability to describe or get information that otherwise might not be quite as easy to get.
Mm.
So I can, for example, use IRA to and the AI portion of it to read a recipe and then say, now what was the temperature I have to put the oven at, and it'll
Mm.
just tell me the temperature. How many cups of flour, and do so many other things. And we're finding that in reality that goes far beyond blindness. The Meta Ray-Ban glasses have a level of artificial intelligence, if you will, or ability to give you information in them. They need to do a lot to improve it, but I can tell Meta to look at something and in theory describe it. Sometimes it does well and sometimes it doesn't. It should do better than it does, and hopefully they will work on that more. But the bottom line is that there is a lot that's being done, and that doesn't just help me, that helps so many people. There are so many times that if a person doesn't have to look at something, but has another way to get the information while they're doing something that really attracts their eyesight attention, that's a useful thing. So, what we're going to find and what we're learning collectively as a society is the kinds of things that I use are also just as usable by other people and will enhance their lives as well.
Outstanding. One of the things that I'd like to share with my audience and my platform is inspirational people, and I would encourage folks listening to this video here to, and I'll put the Michael's links in his bio underneath this video. But for those, Michael, I found so smart, so smart. Studied physics in college, was an Eagle Scout. He's taking on some of the biggest challenges For myself, I only went up to second class in scouts. But for Michael to achieve an Eagle Scout ranking is just outstanding. And talk about learning and studying a difficult major, physics. Oh, wow. So uh, his resume is incredibly impressive. His background and what he experienced through 9/11, just an outstanding, inspirational individual. Um, his blindness to me hasn't stopped him from achieving many of the things that us quote unquote normal people find extremely difficult. And so, Michael, last parting words in terms of a message to those out there that is going through an obstacle or a challenge or a struggle. What message could you provide to them?
Well, the reality is we all live in the same world. And what we need to do is to recognize that just because somebody is different than us, that does not in any way indicate that they're less than us. And that we all need help and that we all should be willing to accept help. But for most people, don't assume that someone needs help. Ask if they want help,
Mm,
and they'll tell you if they do or not. But the fact of the matter is that we are all on the same planet and we all ought to learn to work together. And the fact is that the experiences of people who are different than us may very well help us in so many ways that we never imagined, which is why I've been a keynote speaker ever since escaping from the World Trade Center on September 11th,
mm,
2001, because I want people to learn that difference can enhance what people do, and that in reality, at the same time, any one of us could be put in a very unconventional and perhaps scary situation, and we should ask ourselves, are we prepared to be able to deal with that? And we can be prepared if we learn how. One of the things that we haven't really talked about is I wrote a book about my experiences in the World Trade Center and about being a blind person called Thunderdog, the story of a blind man, his guide dog, and the triumph of trust at Ground Zero. And then this last August, we published another book. There was a middle book called Running with Roselle, which was really written for kids, more about me and Roselle both growing up and how we met. Roselle was the guide dog who was with me in the World Trade Center. But last August, we published a new book through Tyndale House. And that book is called Live Like a Guide Dog, True Stories from a Blind Man and His Dogs about being brave, overcoming adversity, and moving forward in faith. And the idea behind that is to teach people how they can learn to control fear and not let fear overwhelm, or as I put it, blind them, but that in reality, you can use fear as a very powerful tool. And I use lessons I learned from all of my guide dogs and Fantasia, my wife's service dog. And Fantasia herself was a breeder at Guide Dogs for the Blind. We adopted her, and she figured out what Karen was able to do and not do. And so suddenly, when Karen started, if she dropped something on the floor, Fantasia just took up the initiative to pick it up and give it to her
mm.
and learn how to do other things to help her all by herself. So the fact is that we're all part of the same world and we need to be a little bit more tolerant and understanding, um, and grateful for when we get that kind of treatment.
Yeah, absolutely beautiful message, Michael, and great learning lessons that everyone can for sure take away from our conversation with you. And uh, you are my inspiration, Michael. Outstanding, just individual and human being. So thank you again for the time today. And again, for those that want to learn more about Michael and support him through his books, pick up his books, as well as if you're an organization out there that needs a motivational, inspirational thought leader, Michael is a great guy to seek and uh, set a booking for. So again, thank you very much for your time today, Michael.
Thanks, Mickey. I really appreciate your time and all you've done as well.
Yeah, thank you.